A pleasant day, everyone. Today, let me share with you an insight in answer to the question: can human beings have free will if God exists as the creator of all sensible things, including our bodies, and of all causal connections, including all our body movements? This question touches on the philosophical debate about the compatibility of free will and God's omniscience and sovereignty. It may be true that the issue can be complex, but let me simplify the key points. In the scenario being described, where God is the creator of everything, including our bodies and all causal connections, the question of human free will becomes a topic of philosophical discussion. Let me first clarify what the concept of causal connection is, since it was previously mentioned. It is closely tied to the theory of causation. This theory is all about the understanding how events are linked together in a cause and effect way. Causal connection is basically the relationship between what happens first, and that is the cause, and what happens next, which is the effect. Like, for example, in Berkeley's theory, God's consistent involvement is what connects events. So, when we talk about the theory of causation, we're talking about how things are connected and how one event leads to another. In the scenario being described, where God is the creator of everything, including our bodies and all causal connections, the question of human free will becomes a topic of philosophical discussion. Let me discuss with you some key points to answer this. The first one is compatibilism. Some philosophical perspectives, known as compatibilism, argue that free will and God's sovereignty can coexist. Can they really coexist? They suggest that even if God created everything and controls causal connections, human actions can still be considered free if they align with an individual's desires, intentions, and choices. In this view, our actions are free as long as they are not externally coerced or determined by outside factors. Let's try connecting compatibilism with free will. When we say compatibilism, this attempts to reconcile the idea of God's control over creation with human free will. It argues that free will doesn't necessarily require the absence of external influences. Instead, it emphasizes that actions can still be considered free if they emerge from a person's internal desires and intentions, even if those desires were shaped by external factors, including God's influence as the creator. Another angle to consider is the concept of divine foreknowledge. If God is all knowing and knows how every event will unfold, including our actions, some argue that this might challenge the idea of free will. The question is, if God knows in advance what we will do, how can our choices be truly free? Another question: how do you grapple with the idea of divine foreknowledge potentially affecting the concept of free will, given that God's knowledge of our actions could suggest predetermined choices? The challenge of divine foreknowledge arises from the notion that if God knows in advance how we will act, our choices might seem predetermined. Some theologians and philosophers argue that God's knowledge doesn't necessarily mean causation. Just because God knows what we will choose doesn't mean our choices are forced or determined by that knowledge. This viewpoint maintains that foreknowledge and free will can coexist. Okay, so another point, the third one, is open theism and free will. Some theologians and philosophers propose open theism. This is a perspective where God's omniscience doesn't extend to knowing all future actions. In this view, free will is preserved because future actions are considered open and not predetermined, even for God. Open theism proposes that God might not know every future event, particularly those involving human choices. This view keeps room for uncertainty in the future, maintaining that human actions are truly free and not predetermined. Fourth, we have mystery and paradox. Ultimately, the relationship between God's sovereignty, human free will, and divine foreknowledge is a topic that's debated across religious and philosophical traditions. Some argue that it might be a mystery beyond full human comprehension and could only involve paradoxes. These mystery and paradoxes are also called philosophical paradoxes. The issue of free will, divine sovereignty, and foreknowledge presents philosophical paradoxes that have puzzled thinkers for centuries. For instance, the paradox of determinism. This paradox of determinism questions how free will can exist if every event, including our actions, is determined by prior causes. Similarly, the problem of evil raises questions about the compatibility of a benevolent God with the existence of moral wrongdoing. Finally, diverse beliefs. Different religious and philosophical perspectives have varying interpretations of the coexistence of God's power and human agency. Some traditions emphasize human responsibility. May I repeat that. Some traditions emphasize human responsibility, while others focus on divine providence. Is it human responsibility or we focus on divine providence? In relation to diverse beliefs, there are also what we call religious and cultural variations. Different religious and cultural backgrounds contribute to varied perspectives on this topic. Some religious traditions emphasize the importance of human choice and responsibility, often accommodating free will within the framework of divine providence. Others might emphasize God's sovereignty and see human choices as fitting within a larger divine plan. The question of whether human beings can have free will in a universe where God is the creator of all things and causal connections is a complex and debated topic. Many people hold diverse viewpoints on this matter, and the compatibility of free will and God's sovereignty remains a philosophical puzzle with no universally agreed upon answer. If I may say, that the relationship between God's power, foreknowledge, and human free will remain a topic of theological reflection and personal belief. Many theologians and philosophers grapple with these complex issues and offer various interpretations, but definitive answers can be elusive due to the profound nature of the questions involved. So let's simplify it further. The question is, can we have free will if God is in control? I repeat, can we have free will if God is in control? People wonder if we make our own choices, if God created everything and knows everything. Remember these final points to think about. Number one, causal connection means how one thing makes another thing happen. And this is important in the theory of causation. This theory looks at how events are related. One event leads to another. In Berkeley's idea, God's involvement is what links events. So, the theory of causation is about understanding how things are connected, how we connect things, and how one event causes another. Number two, a question arises. If God already knows our actions beforehand, does that mean we don't truly choose? Some believe that God's knowing doesn't make us do things. But you know what the truth is? We still make our own choices. We still make our own decisions, even if God already knows what will happen. Number three, some say God might not know everything about the future, especially our choices. This could mean our choices are genuinely free and open. Our choices are genuinely free and open. Number four, the ideas raise important questions about God's power, our choices, and outcomes relate. People and beliefs vary in how they interpret and understand these concepts. Number five, depending on your background and beliefs, you might have varied perspectives. We know that people have different ideas, they have different perspectives in life. Some believe we control our choices, but others see them as part of the larger plan. These questions have puzzled smart minds for a while. We all have different ideas, and there's no one size fits all answer. In short, figuring out if we have free will when God is involved is a deep question with lots of ideas, but no simple answer that everyone agrees on. As a believer of the Catholic faith, I am aware that people have different views on whether God gave us free will. Some think we can make our own choices, while believes while others believe God's plan influences us. While we have the freedom to make our own decisions, to make our own choices, I believe that God's overall plan and power are still guiding and overseeing everything that happens. It's like you're driving a car on a road. When you drive a car, you can choose which turns to take, but the road itself and the destination are ultimately determined by a bigger plan. So, in this perspective, our choices matter and have consequences, but they are also part of a larger picture that is directed by God's wisdom and purpose. It is a way of understanding that our free will operates within the bounds of God's sovereignty, suggesting that even when we make our choices, there is a belief that God's ultimate plan is at work in our lives and in the world. Thank you.